She called me jobless and laughed about it in front of her friends. But they all worked for the company I secretly own. The moment I will never forget happened on a Saturday afternoon in my own living room in the house I had paid for in cash, while I was standing beside a couch I had bought with money I earned long before my wife had ever heard the name of the industry she now worked in. Priya was hosting her friends that day. 4 women gathered around with wine glasses, laughter, and that particular kind of loose, confident noise people make when they believe they are completely safe from judgment. I walked in from the garage wearing the same old gray t-shirt I had been wearing since morning. It was the kind of shirt a man wears when he has nothing left to prove to anyone. I had been outside for a while, not fixing anything, not doing anything useful, just sitting with my thoughts. The way I had done often during the 2 years since I stepped back from running the company every day. Quiet, content, not bothering anybody. I said hello, gave a polite smile, and reached past one of Priya's friends, a woman named Tiffany Braun, whom I had met maybe 3 times, so I could grab a water bottle from the kitchen counter. That was when Priya said it. "Don't mind Holden." She said it with a tiny wave of her hand, as if she were explaining away a piece of furniture that happened to be in the room. "He's been home all day, every day." She laughed, and the sound of it landed somewhere behind my sternum. "He doesn't really work anymore." The room gave those nervous little laughs people make when they are not sure whether something is funny, but they follow the lead of whoever seems most confident. Tiffany lifted her glass and said, "Must be nice." "It's nice for him," Priya answered. This time there was something sharp in her voice, something that had clearly been building for a long time and had finally found an audience. "I'm the one actually going to an office every day." I stood there holding my water bottle and I did not say a word, because 3 of the 4 women sitting in my living room, including Tiffany, went to that office too. They just had no idea who owned it. My name is Holden Price. I'm 47 years old, and the version of me who walked into that living room on that Saturday afternoon did not look like a man who had built anything significant with his life. That was partly by design. I grew up in Tucson, Arizona, and not in the nice part. I grew up in the part where parking lots had chain-link fences, where every house on the block seemed to carry its own explanation for why it looked the way it did. My father worked a trade job his whole life. My mother worked the register at a grocery store for 22 years. Nobody in my family talked about business investments, ownership, or building something from nothing. Those were words that belonged in magazines other people read. I started college at Arizona State and dropped out after 2 years. It was not because I could not handle the work. It was because I could not stop doing the work I was already doing on the side. I had started running small digital campaigns for local businesses, little mom-and-pop places that needed websites and online ads and did not know where to begin. One job led to another, then another. Then a restaurant group asked me to manage their entire online presence, and they paid me more in 1 month than my father made in 3. That was the moment I understood that something had shifted. I was 26 years old, terrified, exhausted, and completely certain of what I was doing. Over the next 20 years, I built what became Price Digital, a mid-sized marketing firm headquartered in Phoenix. By the time I stepped back from daily operations 2 years ago, we had 60 employees and contracts across the Southwest and into the Midwest. We managed digital campaigns for regional hospital networks, real estate development groups, automotive dealerships, and several fast casual restaurant chains trying to grow into national brands. It was not glamorous in the way people imagine glamorous business to be. It was serious work, real work that made real money and kept real people employed. I stepped back because I could. Because I had spent 2 decades being the first person in the building and one of the last people to leave. And I wanted to know what it felt like to be somewhere else. I installed Ryan Gerber as CEO, a man I had hired as an account manager 11 years earlier and watched grow into one of the sharpest operational minds I had ever seen. Ryan ran the company. I remained the sole owner. I had final say on anything significant, reviewed the financials quarterly, and stayed connected without being present the way I used to be. To most of the staff, I was the founder, the man whose name was on the door, the guy who occasionally appeared at company events, shook hands, asked good questions, and disappeared again. I met Priya at a fundraiser for Phoenix Children's Hospital. It was exactly the kind of event I had started attending because it gave me something to do on a Friday night that was not sitting alone in an empty office. She was beautiful, self-possessed, and had a laugh that lit up the room. She worked in event coordination at the time, running her own small business planning corporate gatherings and nonprofit galas. She was ambitious, competent, and compelling. We dated for 14 months and got married at a venue in Scottsdale that I rented out entirely for the occasion. During our courtship, I did not talk much about the business. That was deliberate. I had spent years watching people react to money in ways I did not enjoy. Some leaned in too hard. Some suddenly became very interested in how things worked, what the numbers looked like, and who had access to what. I wanted to know who Priya was when she thought she was marrying a comfortable, semi-retired man with a nice house and no particular ambitions left. I needed to know if she liked me, not what I had built. She passed that test, or at least I thought she did. We had been married 3 years when she came to me with an idea. Her event planning business had plateaued. She was good at the work, but scaling it without capital was slow. She had a friend named Tiffany Braun who worked in marketing operations. Another friend, Cassidy Moore, was a content strategist. A third, Dana Ellsworth, handled client accounts. All of them had been telling Priya that Price Digital was expanding its events-adjacent marketing division and that there were openings. I was thinking, Priya told me one evening about applying. I looked at her from across the kitchen counter where I was pouring coffee. To my company, I said, "I know it's your company," she said, "but Ryan runs it now. You said yourself you're basically advisory at this point." I'd go through the normal application process. I wouldn't use your name. And she did not. To her credit, she submitted her resume like anyone else, went through 2 rounds of interviews, and was offered a position as a senior event partnership coordinator. It was a role created for the new division, and the division actually did need someone with her background. Ryan called me before extending the offer, as he always did for senior hires. I told him to treat it like any other candidate decision. If she was the right fit, hire her. She was. He did. Within a year, Tiffany was brought in for a campaign operations role. Cassidy joined the content team 6 months after that. Dana followed, landing in client services. All of them were hired on merit. All of them were people Priya had encouraged to apply. And all of them were sitting in my living room that Saturday afternoon, laughing at a joke I had not fully finished hearing before I understood exactly what it meant. I wish I could tell you I walked back into the garage and gave it no more thought. I wish I could say I was above it, that a comment like that slides right off a man who knows what he knows about himself. But I am being honest with you here. I sat in that garage for a long time after that. I was not angry exactly. I felt clarified. There is a specific kind of pain that comes from being diminished by someone who should know better. Not by a stranger on the street, not by a competitor, not by some jealous person in a room who knows nothing about you. Your wife. The person who chose you and whom you chose. The diminishment was worse because it was not ignorance. Priya knew I had built something. She just did not respect it anymore because she could no longer see me doing it every day. In her mind, the man who was not driving to an office every morning was not a serious person. In front of her friends, her coworkers, she had made that clear. I thought about the version of me at 26, eating vending machine sandwiches in a rented office space in Tempe, running campaigns for a dental practice, a hardware store, and a woman who sold homemade soap online. I thought about what that version of me would say to the version of me sitting in the garage now. Then I thought about Tiffany Braun's direct deposit, Cassidy Moore's benefits package, Dana Ellsworth's quarterly performance bonus. I picked up my phone and called Ryan Gerber. Ryan had been with me long enough that I did not need to explain much. But I gave him the full picture anyway because he deserved to understand what he might be walking into. I told him about the Saturday afternoon. I told him about the comment. I told him exactly who had been in the room when it was said. Ryan was quiet for a long moment after I finished. "You want me to look at their files?" he asked. "I want you to look at their performance," I said. There was a distinction there, and Ryan understood it immediately. "Tell me what you find." He called me back 2 days later. Tiffany Braun's work was adequate but unremarkable. She had missed 2 significant internal deadlines in the past quarter and had been given an informal verbal warning by her team lead, though it had not yet escalated to HR. Cassidy Moore had one formal written note in her file from 6 weeks earlier, related to misrepresenting turnaround times to a client. Dana Ellsworth had a pattern of billing discrepancies that Ryan's finance team had already flagged and was currently reviewing. Nothing criminal, but sloppy. Repeated. Consistent enough to have warranted attention. None of them were stars. None of them were irreplaceable. None of them were in danger of being offered a competing salary by a rival firm. Priya's file was more complicated because Priya was actually good at her job. Her client satisfaction numbers were strong. Her events had come in on budget, and 2 clients had specifically requested that she be assigned to their accounts for the coming fiscal year. This was not the file of someone I could justify letting go for performance reasons. And I did not want to. That was not the point. "What are you thinking?" Ryan asked. I told him. I will not pretend what followed was simple. I had a conversation with Priya first, a real one, not the controlled detonation kind. I told her about that Saturday. I told her exactly what I had heard, and I told her how it had landed. I was not cold about it. I was not performing anything. I just talked to her the way I wished she had talked to me, with respect. She got defensive immediately. That was the first stage. The comment was taken out of context, she said. Her friends had been asking what I did all day, she explained, and she had only been trying to answer. She had not meant it the way it sounded. I asked her to tell me how she had meant it. She could not. The silence in the room was the most honest thing that had happened between us in months. And in that silence, I think she understood something, even if she was not ready to say it out loud. The marriage was not something I was willing to end over one comment made during a wine gathering. But it was something I needed to understand the meaning of, and I was beginning to. "I need you to know something," I told her. I asked Ryan to restructure some of the senior-level positions. She looked at me carefully. "What does that mean?" "It means your role is being redefined. The events partnership division is consolidating under a different structure. Ryan will explain the details on Monday." "Are you—" She stopped, then started again. "Are you firing me, Ryan?" as I said. "Professionally. Based on the restructure, your position as it currently exists will no longer exist. Holden, the company is mine, Priya. It has always been mine. Ryan runs it, but I own it. You knew that when you applied." She went very still. "Your friends," I continued, "are having similar conversations on Monday. Tiffany has documented performance issues. Cassidy has a client relations flag on file. Dana's billing discrepancies have been under review for weeks. These are legitimate business decisions." The color left her face in a way I had never seen before. "You can't. This isn't—" She pressed both hands flat on the counter, as if she needed to steady herself. "This is because of Saturday. You're doing this because of a comment." "I'm doing this," I said, "because I run a company that requires accountable professionals in every role. And because I finally started paying attention to who was in those roles." Monday came like any other Monday at Price Digital. The parking lot filled up between 8 and 8:30. The coffee machine in the break room got its usual workout. People sat down at their desks, opened their calendars, and expected a normal week. Ryan handled it the way only Ryan could handle it, with precision and without drama. He had prepared properly. HR was involved at every step. The performance rationale for each termination was documented in a way that was airtight, professional, and fair. Tiffany was called in at 9 o'clock, Cassidy at 10 o'clock, Dana at 11 o'clock. Each conversation was professional. Each one cited the documented record. Each one included a standard severance package prepared by HR, information about continuation of benefits, and a thank you for their contributions to the company. Priya was the fourth conversation. Ryan handled hers personally, just as he had handled the others. Her position was being dissolved as part of a structural realignment of the events marketing division. It had nothing to do with performance. He said that clearly and genuinely because it was true. Her work had been strong. The decision was architectural. She received a package consistent with her tenure. I was not in the building. I do not believe in spectacle. The point was never the show of it. The point was the truth of it. That evening, I was sitting at my kitchen table when Priya came home. She set her bag down near the door and stood there for a moment without saying anything. I waited. "All 4 of us," she said finally. "Yes, on the same day. Ryan believed a clean break was kinder than a drawn-out transition, I said. I agreed with him. She pulled out a chair and sat across from me. For a long stretch, neither of us said anything. I thought about what she must have been turning over in her mind, the geometry of the last 3 years, recalculating angles she thought she had understood. The husband she had described as a man who did not really work anymore, a man who had been home all day, a man who apparently did not have a real job. They're going to think I knew, she said. Tiffany and Cassidy and Dana, they're going to think I knew you were behind this and said nothing. Did you know? You know I didn't. Then you didn't. She looked at me across the table, and for the first time in a long time, I saw something behind her eyes that was not pride, impatience, or the kind of social performance I had watched become part of her over 3 years of marriage. It was something closer to grief. I didn't respect you, she said. She did not say it like a question. She did not say it like an accusation. She said it like a woman reading a sentence aloud, so she could hear what it sounded like. No, I agreed. You didn't. I didn't understand what you had built. I thought. She stopped, then tried again. I think I started measuring you by what I could see. And I couldn't see anything. You were just here. I was going to an office every day and working and building something, and you were just here. In the house I own, I said. In the city where I built a company that employs 60 people, including, until today, your 3 closest friends. She flinched at that. Good. I am not going to tell you that comment did not matter, I said. It mattered. The comment mattered. The fact that you made it in front of an audience mattered. The fact that 3 of the 4 women in this room were people you had encouraged to build their careers at a company whose owner you were publicly dismissing, that mattered. Not because it hurt my feelings, Priya, because it told me something true about what you think of me, and I needed to know that. She was quiet for a long time. Is our marriage something you're ending? She asked. I looked at her. I looked at the woman I had married at a venue in Scottsdale. The woman whose laugh once lit up an entire room. The woman who was very good at her job and terrible at seeing the full picture of her own life. I don't know yet, I said honestly. I think we need to find out what this is before we decide what to do with it. What happened in the weeks after that Monday matters, and I will come back to it. But first, there was a phone call from Ryan 2 weeks after the restructure. He had spoken with one of the clients whose account had been handled by the Events Partnership Division, a real estate development group based in Tempe that was expanding into commercial projects in Scottsdale and Gilbert. They had been satisfied with the events coordination work, but now they wanted to expand the relationship. They were looking at a full digital campaign, something that required a more integrated strategy. Ryan asked them directly what they wanted. They said they wanted to speak with the owner, so Ryan called me. I went into the office for the first time in 4 months. I sat in a conference room with a glass wall looking out over the Phoenix skyline. I drank coffee from the machine I had bought for the break room 6 years earlier. And I talked strategy with a development group that would become one of our largest accounts of the year. Afterward, Ryan walked me to the elevator. You know what's funny? He said. You've been gone 2 years, and this place runs like you never left. That means you've been doing your job right, I told him. He smiled at that. The staff was surprised to see you in the building, I'll bet. Cassidy's replacement starts next week, he said, because Ryan never wasted an opportunity to brief me. The new event structure is already showing cleaner margins, and the client services issue with Dana was messier than we expected. Finance found more billing irregularities. You made the right call. I nodded. I already knew. I had been reviewing the financials. One more thing, Ryan said, holding the elevator door. Tiffany called HR last week. She's considering whether to claim wrongful termination. I looked at him. Her file, I asked. The verbal warning, the missed deadlines. Everything documented and signed off by her team lead before any of this started. HR is comfortable. Legal reviewed it. He paused. She's going to figure out pretty quickly she doesn't have a case. And she did. Tiffany hired an employment attorney in Tempe who reviewed the file and called her back within a week to tell her what Ryan's HR team already knew. The performance record was clean. The process had been followed. The severance was above standard, There was nothing there. Tiffany did not call Priya after that. None of them did. At least, not in the way Priya expected. What surprised me most in all of this was the conversation I had with my father. I drove down to Tucson on a Thursday. My father was 71 years old and still lived in the same house where I grew up. When I pulled up, he was in the backyard working on the irrigation system that had been giving him trouble for months. I helped him fix it. Then we sat in the yard with 2 beers and I told him everything. He listened the way my father had always listened, without rushing toward a verdict, without filling the silence with noise. When I finished, he looked out at the yard for a long moment. "Why'd you tell her?" he asked. "Tell her what? That you were the one behind it?" "Monday. You could have let Ryan handle it and never said a word." I thought about that. Because she needed to know, for her sake or yours. That question sat in the air between us. "Mine," I admitted. "Both, mostly mine." He nodded. "You didn't do it to hurt her." "I did it because I couldn't ignore what she had shown me about how she saw me." "She saw a man sitting home," my father said, and assumed that meant nothing. He was not defending her. He was just stating it plainly the way he always did. "People do that," he said. "They measure by what they can see. Your grandfather did it to me when I started, said I was just going to run myself into the ground. He couldn't see what I was building. He just saw a young man who didn't have much yet." "What did you do?" My father took a sip of his beer. "I kept building. Eventually he could see it. Some people need to see it before they believe it." "Priya saw it," I said. "She knew what I built. She just stopped believing I was still connected to it." "Is your marriage going to make it?" I did not answer right away. "I think we're finding out," I said. "She's in counseling. I've joined her for 3 sessions. It's honest, at least. More honest than the last year of us not talking about what was wrong." My father was quiet for a moment. "You know what I always thought about you?" he said. "What?" "That you never needed anybody to believe in you to keep going." He looked at me. "That's been your best thing and your hardest thing your whole life. You don't need validation, but you want it, especially from the people you love." That landed somewhere real. "Yeah," I said. "I do." It has been 5 months since that Saturday afternoon. Priya and I are still married. I want to be careful about what I claim there because we are still in the middle of something. Not the crisis of it anymore, but the slower work of figuring out what we actually are, what we want, and what we expect from each other. Counseling has been hard, honest, and occasionally infuriating in the way honest things often are. She has said things about how she had started to see me that cost her something to say. I have said things about how I allowed distance to build between us instead of naming it. We have not resolved everything, but we are talking to each other in a way we were not before. What I know for certain is this. I do not regret Monday. I do not regret the phone call to Ryan. I do not regret the conversation at the kitchen table. I built something real over 20 years. I stepped back from it because I had earned the right to. That has never once made me the man my wife described to her friends over wine in my own living room. Tiffany found a position at a smaller firm in Chandler within 2 months. Cassidy started freelancing, which I suspect suits her better than an office environment ever did. Dana's billing issues followed her. Word travels in this industry, and her next employer is going to look closely at those accounts. That is not something I arranged. That is simply the weight of behavior catching up. The real estate client in Tempe signed a 12-month contract with Price Digital 6 weeks ago. Ryan called me when it came through. "Still advisory?" he asked. "Still advisory," I said. "You don't need me in the building for this." "I know," he said, "but the staff liked seeing you. Tell them I said hello." I drove home through Phoenix in the late afternoon under that kind of desert light that turns everything amber and makes even a city look like it was built to last. I thought about my father in his backyard, about the irrigation system that only needed someone to pay attention to it, and about the things people miss when they are not looking carefully. I thought about the word anymore. He does not really work anymore. As if work is only real when someone can watch you do it. As if stepping back from something you built means you have become something lesser. As if the man who built the machine is less important than the machine itself. I am 47 years old. I have 60 employees who count on decisions made with their interest in mind. I have a CEO who calls me when it matters. I have a marriage I am choosing to fight for, not because I have to, but because I believe in the woman underneath the version of her that got comfortable and stopped looking. And I have a Saturday afternoon in my own living room that I will spend the rest of my life being grateful for. Not because of what it cost, but because of what it clarified. Sometimes the people who underestimate you do you a favor. Sometimes you need to see exactly what someone believes about you before you can make honest choices about what happens next. Priya made the mistake of confusing quiet success with a lack of ambition. She saw me in an old gray t-shirt and forgot I was the man who built the company she worked for. I did not answer with noise. I answered with logic. I remembered that I did not have to be in the building every day to be the one responsible for it. In the end, I did not just reclaim my respect, I forced my marriage to become honest. Silence is a luxury you earn. Respect is a boundary you must defend. My name is Holden Price, and I own the company.